Melissa. My guest today is Melissa Kwan. She's the co-founder and CEO of eWebinar. It's an automated webinar platform. And, I invited you here today because you're a Bootstrapped founder, and we're gonna dig into that. I usually start by asking my guests to tell the story of how we met, but I reached out to you on LinkedIn, like cold outreach. Hey, I want to meet you. And somebody already told that story. So instead, ever since we connected, I've been super impressed by your content. So I want to talk about your experience on LinkedIn and how important it is for you to make those new connections.
Cool. Well, I think you're missing one part of the outreach, though. Your first message was, I'm not going to ask for anything from you. And I was like, yeah, cool.
Oh,
no
that's
one
right.
ever says that.
And then I turned around and asked. Yeah.
Yeah. But that was nice, though. It was nice that you tried.
To be fair, I do have an outreach message that says, I'm not going to try to sell you anything. I'm not trying to hard sell a meeting or whatever. And I broke that promise with you because several weeks went by and I was like, actually, I really want you to be on my podcast. I know I said I wouldn't. I like, not only do I want a meeting, but it's kind of a big one.
No, but those are always good meetings, though. It's the meetings that are like, hey, we're both founders and we should chat. I'm like, why?
Or the pitch slap that comes on the heels of. That's the meaning behind my message, right? Is that somebody in your position is getting pitched so often and so blatantly and terribly that I wanted to acknowledge that and say, look, I'm not going to tell you all about my company and my services and expect that you're going to give a damn and give me a 15-minute disco call or whatever.
We all know what that is. We're all identifying with that right now.
Yeah. It's so much. And I think that's why my message works so well is people, they get it. They're like, hey, yeah, you're exactly right. This is a little different from the rest of the stuff in my inbox. I mentioned the bootstrapping thing. You call yourself a bootstrapper. This is the third company that you've bootstrapped. In case there's anybody listening who doesn't know the meaning of that, hasn't read the Seth Godin book, tell me about your definition of bootstrapping and how it differs from starting a venture-backed company.
Yeah. So thanks for asking that clarification question, because I think a lot of people define it differently. A venture-backed company, everybody knows what that is. You go out, get venture capital from institutional investors that expect a certain outcome. There's one equation for that. Bootstrapping actually could mean a lot of things, right? Some people think it's zero funding, just you building a company. I know very few companies that are actually zero funding. There's always some funding involved, right? Whether it's government funding, friends and family. There's some family offices that don't require venture level outcomes. So no unicorn outcomes. There's sweat equity, right? Two founders come together, they don't pay themselves, but they're working on equity and time. So my version of that is our company does not have any venture funding, but myself, my co-founder, each put in capital. I have not paid myself for the past 4 years that we've been building this company. He gets probably 1/3 of the market salary that he should be getting as a lead developer and CTO. And we had some friends and family funding in the beginning just to get this off the ground as well. So I wish I owned 100% of the company, but unfortunately that was not possible. And I didn't have I did have an exit in 2019, but not big enough to fund this whole thing. But actually, a fun little tidbit that not a lot of people know is it was always a dream of mine to build a company with friends. A lot of people hear that and they might think, oh, that's a nightmare, but it would be really cool to build a company where your friends are involved and you could share your successes with them. So I always envision having an investor retreat on the company's account and all of our investors are there and they're all our really good friends. So our friends and family funding was not just anybody that would give us money. It was really handpicked people who, we spend holidays with, who we travel with, who we want to have at our house for Thanksgiving type friends. And so it wasn't an open round and let's just get money in. It's hey, this is the new idea I have. Do you want to do this together? And maybe one day we can enjoy the fruits of our labor together as well.
Mm-hmm. You've hinted at how how much different bootstrapping is from starting a venture-backed company. The fact that you haven't paid yourself in 4 years, that sounds obviously very challenging. There's a big bet going on there, but you've decided to go this route, and this is the third time around where you are. I guess you must be intentionally avoiding taking venture capital. So I just want you to speak to that a little bit. That's a conscious decision you've made.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think, and maybe it's true for them, that, taking venture capital or not taking venture capital is a financial choice. For me, and actually a lot of other, practical founders, as Greg Head would call it, not taking venture capital is actually a lifestyle choice. So what not a lot of founders know is when you take venture capital, you are committing to an outcome. You're committing to returning X% of, or X times the investment for the fund. And typically that exit, depending on, where the investor comes in, needs to be like 100 times, whatever they invested in, right? So they need you to be a unicorn or die trying, like literally die trying. So the major difference is when you are in a venture-backed capital or in a venture-backed company, you need to chase growth. So revenue is growth, right? Whereas a, a non-venture-backed founder, a bootstrap founder, what we care about is profit. Because profit is what pays people and eventually pays you. Revenue is not profit, right? If revenue is much higher than burn, then that's profit, right? But a lot of times,
Right.
especially in the beginning, that it's not. So, and like growth could maybe come in different numbers for a venture-backed company as well, like not just revenue, but maybe users. Maybe you run a consumer product and users is more important, but you have to demonstrate some sort of growth that allows you to get revenue sometime down the road. But I guess the major difference is when you're running a bootstrap company, you have to be very intentional about where you spend. So for example, we do not have any full-time employees. Everybody's a contractor. Number one, because I know I'm not good at managing people. So coming into this company, I didn't want any employees, but I actually can't afford them. I was just talking to a friend in Canada where salary is already lower than the US that is now working for a US company as their marketing person. And she's getting paid like 200 grand US dollars in Canada working remote. How do I compete with that? So we need to figure out creative ways to find talent that is not based where we are. But I love that because we're a fully remote team. I've been a nomad for 4 years. I want to hire people based on skill sets and passion and commitment, not their location. Like that's not important to me. Everything's done on, Slack and Monday and all that anyway. So when you are a bootstrap company, you have to be super intentional on how much you're spending because there's still like a zero cash date. You're trying to stretch that capital that you have as long as possible. And you actually have to be much more intentional and careful about the features and the number of features that you choose to invest in. And also building for the customer, for them to come in and stay, not building for revenue, for them to come and pay you. And while that sounds the same, it's not the same, right? So a venture-backed company might be able to fake some growth by spending money on ads and buying the revenue, but not really reporting on the spend. They're just buying the revenue. But when you're buying revenue, it also gives you a false sense of success because you think people are signing up and people are, using your product. But in a bootstrap company, when people leave, every person that leaves hurts you. So you're doing everything you can to listen to them and see what is the next product decision that I need to make to attract the next person and make sure that they stay. Right. So I think that's probably the two major differences with the two types of companies is how much you're able to spend on people and your roadmap.
Our situations are different because I'm an agency and you're a product, but I operate the same way. I don't like the idea of how do I make payroll next month? So I run contractors. As a bootstrapper and as somebody who can't just simply buy that growth or buy that revenue, how do you know when you're getting close to achieving product market fit what are those early signs that you're establishing that traction? And then what do you do when you see it?
I mean, I think that would answering that question would require me to have experienced product market fit. And I think
Okay.
everybody like everybody defines that so differently, right? That's another thing that's like you've heard some people say, "Oh, you have customers, they're happy, you have product market fit." I mean, is that true? Right? And then you hear somebody like, the Superhuman founder on the SaaS podcast saying, "Oh, product market fit means people are you know, running through the door to sign up and you've got a waiting list of 400 people." It's like, no, that does not happen. Like this whole hockey stick growth thing is a myth, right? So, but I don't know. I think I would define product market fit as something like, you always have to sell, right? Because one out of 100 people are ever, or maybe even 1,000 people are ever going to buy from you. So you're always going to need to sell. Like, I don't know a single product where people are running to sign up. And I don't know, like for companies like MailChimp, for example, how long that took them to become a household name. And that company has been around for 20 years, right? So I
Right.
think product
They
market
buy
fit,
like TV advertising and stuff now too,
yeah. And I
right?
think like people
Yeah.
use product market fit too loosely. But I think that it is when somebody hears about the product or the problem you're solving and they immediately get it. And it is something that they buy as soon as they get it, right? Or you don't need to explain a lot to them, right? Or maybe in some ways it's become a household name, at least in your industry or, in your line of business. I personally
Mhm.
have never experienced that. We are pretty close to a million ARR at this point. I think we're like a few $1,000s MRR away from that. And every sale is still, is still work. Every sale is still a conversation. But one day I would like to experience product market fit and be able to answer that question.
Thank you for sharing your revenue numbers. That's very generous of you. I feel like it behooves me to ask, what is the ARR where Melissa takes a salary?
It's something that I think about a lot.
You could
A
already be,
year
but you're
ago,
just buying, you're still buying that.
well, a year ago I would say, 70,000, right? But we're over that, and I there's always some new thing to invest in, right? We just hired, a junior dev as tech support because we needed it. Like we're at the size where we our CTO cannot be taking care of, tech related integration questions in our support inbox. He needs to be coding big features. Our CTO, who's my co-founder, just lost his side hustle. And his side hustle was like consulting like 2 hours a month, but they were paying him because he was so senior, like a ridiculous amount of money. But that got us through the first 4 years. And he just lost that. So next month, instead of maybe paying myself a little bit, I then have to make up for what he lost because he has a family. I don't have a family. He has like 2 kids, one's in university, one's going to university, like that's a real expense, right? And I would love to have another senior person on board, but we haven't found that person yet. So, you always make compromises, right? Like, yeah, maybe I can pay myself a little bit, but it's not meaningful enough that I would give up investing in the business. Because right now, like we've worked so hard to get to where we are, if we have more human capital, we can grow faster, we can get more revenue, and then, maybe I can pay myself. But
You're
don't
building
forget
an
I had
asset
a
that you own. Yeah.
yeah, and I don't take that lightly, right? Like it's not like I'm getting nothing. I am working for my equity. And every day we're building value in that equity. But don't forget, like this is an earned luxury. Like I worked for 10 years. My last business I ran for 5 years, and I had an exit. And even though it wasn't like retirement level exit, it was still like pretty life changing. So I've been able to live off of that and be in the position that I am now because I paid my dues elsewhere.
Congratulations for that, by the way, because so many people will never get there, and you did. And obviously, it's given you the know-how and confidence to carry on and go again, and that's a big deal. I say that as somebody who hasn't come anywhere near that, and I want to acknowledge that. That
Thank
is
you.
super cool. In terms of establishing that traction, finding the right customers, what marketing channels are working best for you right now? And I guess a follow up to that would be why? Why is that? Why are those things working?
I mean, the truth is we do such a bad job with attribution, but it's also it's also because attribution has gotten so much harder,
I was going to
right?
say attribution is hard. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I
And
keep
but like, can we just quickly define that for people? What you mean is it's hard to know where that customer came from because you have so many irons in the fire. That's what you mean by that?
it's not so much so many irons in the fire. It's that there are
Touch
so
points.
many different, yeah, there's so many different touch points that don't come directly to you. And I think like, what's his name? Is it like Chris Walker? Like he posts a lot about this on LinkedIn is like,
Yeah, Refine Labs. Yeah,
yeah, like
dark social, and
yeah,
yeah.
someone hears me on this podcast and they come to our website and then they don't do anything. And then they tell a friend because they saw our website next week. And then that friend comes over
Mm-hmm.
and that friend comes to us. And even if we ask them, where
Yeah,
did you hear about us? They'll be like, oh, yeah, I forgot. Or my friend told
yeah.
me, or my boss told me. Like, so if
And they
you
DM the marketing guy on LinkedIn, and
yeah. And like,
yeah,
if
yeah.
you only do things that you can attribute, then you're not going to do anything. Right. So all I can say is we tried certain things that did not work that we're no longer doing.
What's an
So,
example of something that didn't work?
so because of our price point, right? Like we started at a $49 price point. We're now at a starting point of 99. It's a very low, revenue per user product. And these kind of products have to be sold through customer led, product led, marketing led strategies. And in the beginning, because I'm from an enterprise sales world, like I thought I could build this business through like one on one outreach, which is my training, like what I built my career on. And while I did do one on one outreach to get the company going, you very quickly exhaust that immediate network and even 1 degree network. And I actually tried cold outreach through email, like mass email, LinkedIn, and myself to do one on one outreach for like a year, like the first year. And I
Mm-hmm.
hired someone to do that full time. So I feel like I really exhausted those channels. But I realized like nobody buys $100 product through one on one outreach. It's just not normal, right? Like you buy a $5,000 per year or $10,000 or $100,000 product a year through cold outreach because you want to speak to a person because of the price point. So once I realized that, I started studying what other companies were doing in my price point. And that's when I saw that founders, if the company is smaller, and just executives of companies were building communities and audiences on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram. And then I started studying what kind of the new trends were because I've actually never been in a product led growth company. So since then, since beginning of last year, we started investing pretty heavily into SEO and content, like owning our own strategy,
Mm-hmm.
owning all of our own content strategy, but also actively for me to post on LinkedIn once a week. So I've been doing that for like almost like 9 months
Is it
now.
only
Or
once a
sorry,
week?
once a day. Sorry, once a day I
I was
post
going
on.
to say,
Yeah,
well,
yeah, I post once a day. But I've been doing that for 9 months and now looking at like diversifying on other channels as well. And
mm-hmm.
then as I, mentioned before that we hit record, one of the reasons why I think ads for us doesn't work is because we are not a household name. We're not a product that people just get, right? We're not a MailChimp. We're not email marketing. We're like automated webinar. So people are like, well, what's that? Like I know Zoom, but I don't know what an automated webinar is. And I started trying podcasting as a marketing strategy because podcasting is a great way to have a conversation with someone that you're not having a conversation with. So those are the three things that we do is like really building on like social audience. And it's just like me sharing one thing a day on bootstrapping companies that I've learned in the past. It's owning our social strategy, like churning out 3 to 5 pieces of content like every month consistently and just like actively getting on podcasts. These are the three things that we do. And the things that don't work is like just anything to do with cold outreach and like one-on-one sales is something that we no longer do.
That's interesting insights. What's that LinkedIn experience been like for you so far? 9 months of posting daily. it sure seems like you're killing it. Your network is a pretty good size. Maybe a better way to ask the question is, what advice do you have for a founder who is maybe on the fence about whether to put themselves out there on social media, and they see somebody like you who, in my opinion at least, is doing a terrific job of it? How would you advise them?
Well, first, I want to thank you on acknowledging that, but it's not, it's so hard. Like, it's really so hard, like people like Justin Welsh and all those guys, they have massive audiences. They make it sound super easy. Oh, just do this. Just have this template. Use my template. It's like, actually, it's really, really difficult for someone to build an
I do
audience.
this for a living. It is very hard.
Yeah, it's
I
just,
don't do a good job of it. And here I am, like, waving my hands, telling people to do it. So.
it's such a lift, right? But
Mhm.
I think what's important, I mean, the first thing is if you don't exist on social in some form right now, if you're a founder of a startup, you don't exist at all, because people care almost more about who's behind the product and the story and the mission more than the product itself. I am more likely to buy a product if I think I know the other person on the other side, even if I've never met them face to face. Right. So even if I've read their content, I vibe with them. I like their philosophies. I all of a sudden develop a liking also for their company. And if I'm looking for that type of software, they're going to come to me first, like in my mind. So if you're not out there, you just don't exist. Right. So I think just knowing that, like, you can call as many people as you want. You can send as many people as you want, like send emails to as many people as you want, but that is not scalable. Every minute that you spend on one person is just one person. So especially as a founder who's bootstrapped, you need to think of more ways to talk to, one to many in order to scale and have better ROI of your time. But I think the second thing that not many people talk about is momentum is so important, right? So a lot of times putting yourself out there is not just about like, you almost can't put yourself out there for the sake of being out there and going viral. Like, you actually have to want to offer your audience something valuable. Like, the intention is so important because it's impossible to write for virality. Like, you just have to slowly build an audience, and sometimes one of those things catch fire and then it becomes, really good for a week, maximum two.
Mhm.
But the important thing, like a byproduct of getting out there every day and just running your own engine, is you just become more creative. Like, as the more you post, the more content you create, the more people you meet, the more conversations you have, the more creative you get. And then you get to apply those things to your business. And once you have an audience, you can even ask your audience questions on things that you are struggling with. And that, I think, is the biggest surprise to building this kind of audience, is like, not only am I able to build a tribe around, bootstrappers and people that care about, my experience, I'm also able to learn from other people and just my own experience on what else I can do in my current business.
I think that's one of the things that you do very well is not just asking the questions, but showing some vulnerability and telling stories about things that, are difficult. It's something that I've observed, is just that the people that I think are doing it well are showing more of themselves and more of the truth, and it's easier to connect with. It's just an observation that, again, just kind of like in the mutual admiration society here, just saying, you do a really good job of that. and that's, there's a lesson in that too, right? I got a couple of like wrap up questions, but I wanted to ask about, just going back to the bootstrapping thing again. If there's a founder out there who's trying to think of choosing one path or the other, how would you advise them between, pursuing venture capital and finding a way to go it alone, where go it alone could mean friends and family rounds, government funding, all of that, but avoiding the need, I guess, to have those, unicorn multipliers with venture.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that I want people to understand is there isn't a right or wrong way to do, like, to build a business, but there is a right or wrong way for you. And that is what I think a lot of founders don't understand, is they don't even know what they're getting into, right? So you have to, I think the question to ask is not, should I raise capital or not? right? The question to ask yourself is, what kind of life do I want to live? Right? Do I like, and how much am I willing to sacrifice to get there? Right? So it's like, okay, well, I want to be a billionaire. Okay, well, if you were going to have 0 days off for the next 10 years, would that be okay? Right? If you were to work for 5 years and everything blows up and you get to zero, would that be okay? Because most people, that's
That's
most
the how.
people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And like, of course, like I want to be a billionaire, but I'm not willing to give up my weekends and evenings anymore, right? I'm not willing to have an office and have a board and have someone tell me that I can't nomad, right? Or that I have to build my product a certain way, or I don't need to get, I don't want to get permission before, I hire another person or make a significant hire, right? That's not appealing to me. None of that is appealing to me, right? So I think the first question to ask is like, what kind of life do I want to live? And if the life that you want to live is, I want to be a billionaire and I'm willing to put in all the hours, I know exactly what I'm going for, and I'm ready for this to blow up, and I want to learn from it, and I want to go that route, right? And if that's going to make me happy, then you should go and do that, right? But if what makes you happy is life work balance and having a family and having weekends and evenings and being 100% in control of your company and your time, then maybe venture capital is not the right path for you. And there's lots of different ways to fund your company. There is so much money out there if you just look for it. It's just not getting reported on because it's not cool and no one's paying for that PR.
Exactly. Exactly. Where are the stories about the people who are earning like terrific livings having gone without venture? It's always like so and so raised such and such a round, and it's like that's less impressive to me than somebody who built a massively profitable company without fundraising. I feel like I should ask you about eWebinar. Tell me about eWebinar and how it works, because you said, it's tough with cold outreach. You're not a household name, but you've built this product and you do have paying customers and it's clear that they like it. How does it work?
Yeah, so we help companies run hundreds of engaging webinars without ever needing to be there live. So sounds like magic because it almost is. We turn any video into an interactive webinar that you can just set on a recurring schedule. So think about things that you are doing repetitively on Zoom or want to be. So like sales demos, onboarding, training, all of that stuff that you might be doing now, or you're sick of it, or you want to be doing more, but there's there's nobody that wants to take over. We automate that with a video. And then we've got a chat system that allows you to hop in and respond live if you happen to be there. But if you're not, then people will get your response on email, just like any, intercom style support chatbot. So yeah, it's just a problem that I live with in my past. Because we were bootstrapped, I was everything except for code. So I was doing like all those demos and onboardings and all those things to keep our customers on board. So they would keep paying us so I could keep paying other people. But all of those things were exactly the same. And I was also nomading. So I was doing all these repetitive webinars and trainings on opposite time zones. I even got to a point where I would land in a new city, immediately test the internet speed to see if it would be fast enough for a Zoom call. And if not, then I would go and get like a Wi-Fi or like a SIM card and tether off my phone. And then I would be doing these at like 4 a.m. in the morning in Japan for somebody in New York. So I just always envisioned this product that would do my job for me while I could just go and like enjoy my life. And that's really the mission now, is to give people their time back. And I want to let people know that you don't have to work in your business to be successful or productive. If you work more creatively and have your time back, you can actually have your life and your business. So that's how the product works, and that's the mission behind it.
That's poignant stuff, particularly for somebody who makes their living as a consultant and coach and wants to be doing more one-to-many. So that's not lost on me. Thank you very much for doing this. Your time is extremely valuable, and I'm incredibly grateful that you shared some of it with me. How can our listeners get in touch with you if they want to connect?
Yeah, so the best way to connect with me is through LinkedIn. My name is spelled Melissa Kwan, Kwan. And if you're curious about how eWebinar works and how it can help you or your business, just go to ewebinar.com. It's spelled exactly as it sounds.
Fantastic. Thank you again, Melissa. I really appreciate you doing this. And apologies again for totally lying to you in my initial outreach message, turning around and asking you if you'd be on my podcast a couple of weeks later. But this was an exceptional circumstance because I'm really impressed by what you're doing. So thank you again.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.